You, Jan, and good morning, everybody. Today, I'd like to introduce once again Steve Frank, who is our favorite political consultant. And he is almost in his 25th year as the publisher of the California Political News and Views. And if you haven't signed up for it yet, you really must. It's at www.capoliticalreview.com. And with that, my internet keeps going squirrely, so I'm going to turn it over to him. Welcome, Steve.
Wendy, thank you very much. We're about 32 days away from changing the world. Even before we're going to have the confirmation of Amy Barrett to the U.S. Supreme Court, and that will make changes to the Supreme Court. Interestingly enough, major changes will be currently the Chief Justice, John Roberts, is the decisive vote, the swing vote on the court. When Barrett becomes a member of the court, Kavanaugh then becomes the swing vote on the court. So it's moving further to constitutional government than ever before. And this is a major change for all of us in every aspect of our lives. But coming to California politics, first, before we get to that, we know that the president now and First Lady have contracted the COVID-19 virus. The questions that are being asked of me by the media, how does this affect the presidential election? And I believe the reality is, one, the Democrats are going to overplay their hand and try to make light of and mock the president for not wearing masks and doing all those public things, while Joe Biden is safe and sound in his bunker doing nothing. And I think the Democrats are going to overplay their hand on that. Second, the purpose of the rallies has been to energize the public. And Donald Trump has been energizing his base support to get more support. Most importantly, between 15 and 20% of the people who attend those rallies are actually registered Democrats. So he is attracting Democrats. Now, whether or not the people will vote for him has nothing to do with the rallies, other than creating more energy and excitement around the presidency. So I think there's going to be a very minor amount of impact on the presidential race. It's going to be the volunteers that every day go out and work. Last night I was at a meeting in Redlands and found out that the national Trump campaign every day in the swing states have 250,000 people knocking on doors in the swing states. And so we have a great ground game. Normally you don't get that type of a number prior to the last 2 weeks of an election. We already have it more than 4 weeks before the election. So the Trump campaign on the national level and in the swing states is in a good position. Money will still be raised. The only difference is we won't have for 2 weeks the president energizing the base. But my guess is while we're speaking here today, the Trump campaign is working out methods of energizing the base even without the president attending rallies. And Joe Biden is not going to be moving much over the next 2 weeks anyway. So he'll stay in his bunker about half that time because he has to get prepared. I will also ask you to put October 8th, the evening of October 8th on your calendar if you haven't already. That's going to be the debate between Vice President Pence and Senator Harris. And that one will be a barn burner, because what Pence is going to do is pin her down to where she stands on issues and where Biden does. For instance, Kamala Harris is a big supporter of Medicare for all. Joe Biden says he's opposed to it. She's a big supporter of the filibusters and packing the court. He won't say where he stands on it. He opposes the Green New Deal. She's a major proponent of it. So even within the Democrat ticket, there's a significant division, and I believe that that's going to come out in the October 8th debate between Vice President Pence and Senator Harris. Very important debate, maybe the most important debate of all four of them, because it's going to be a debate on policy and the differences, not between the Republicans and the Democrats, but between the Democrats and the Democrats, between the establishment Democrats and the socialist progressive Democrats. And we're going to see a major change in the attitude of the Democrat Party after that debate, because either the progressives are going to be upset with Biden, or the traditionalists are going to be upset with Biden, or both of them are, and that is vote suppression, but not done by the Republicans, but done by Joe Biden himself, because of his refusal to give his position on issues. He likes the bunker physically, and his refusals to answer shows even his mind is in the bunker, and he won't get out of that. So here in California, every once in a while we get a real victory, and it's seldom that we do. But yesterday the governor vetoed the bill that would force every high school student to graduate once they've had a course in ethnic studies. And interestingly enough, there was only one group that organized to oppose it, and that was a large number of Jewish groups statewide. Over 80 of them came together and lobbied the governor to veto that bill, and he did. And their reasoning was the curriculum that was going to be used was anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, and racist. And so the governor finally listened to the Jewish community on this and vetoed that bill. And for the students, that means they'll be able to take another course in technology, in computers, in science, math, or English, something that they can use rather than getting an indoctrination in the radicalism of the left. Now, yesterday, the Secretary of State came out with new voter registration figures. And once again, the Republican Party has lost registration vis-a-vis the Democrats. Now, the state Republican Party chair has put out a memo yesterday or the day before, bragging and crowing that under her leadership, we have 300,000 new Republican registrants. That's a great number. That's fantastic. What she forgot to mention is in the same time, the Democrats increased their numbers by over 1.5 million. In other words, 5 times the number that the Republicans did. The Republican Party does not have, since March of 2013, a voter registration program. The Democrats, even today, on October 2nd, are still trying to register voters, and voter registration closes in California on October 19th for the November 3rd election. So we still have time to register voters. The Democrats are doing it. The Republicans are not. And that's one of the reasons we're going to have significant problems with the election. In my district, congressional district, Mike Garcia, the newly elected member of Congress, the Republicans have gained, I believe, about 19,000 new registrants, which is great. Democrats, 38,000. So again, we're falling further into the hole, district by district. And in my newsletter, I believe on Monday, I'll be putting out a statistical analysis of all the target districts and how we're going to have problems, not because of not enough money for our candidates, but because we haven't done voter registration and the hole gets bigger by the day. So here in California, we're still waiting for the governor to open up the state. And here's the little dirty secret. Everyone is so proud, and all these board of supervisors are fighting hard to go to red, to purple, to orange, and whatever color of the day that they want. But if they got every color of the rainbow that Governor Newsom has provided us, at the end of the day, you complete the rainbow, the state of California is still shut down by 50%. He has yet to provide a plan for us that totally opens the state. At no point into the spring of 2021 does he open the state by 100%. We only open up by 50%, and he is yet to open up giving us guidance on how to open up the state totally. So that's extremely important for all of us, because we can't be sitting down and saying, boy, we just moved from red to orange or orange to red, and we're moving in the right direction. Even if you have the rainbow behind you, you're still half shut. One of the interesting things, of course, as this, San Francisco now has a 14% vacancy rate among office buildings, and that rate is growing. That's the highest in the history of San Francisco. In other words, people aren't signing leases in the commercial industries to stay in San Francisco. They're leaving. We also know that rents have dropped dramatically in San Francisco because nobody wants to rent an apartment in San Francisco, even if the rents drop by 10 or 15%, because it's still a city that's closed down and will continue to be closed down. And this is the problem that we have statewide. Now, going into the November election, a couple of points. A lot of folks around the state, I've talked to a lot of county chairs and candidates for office over the last 2 weeks. And the one thing that is needed in areas where you have no really hotly contested races for partisan office, or no races at all, like you mentioned in the 15th district. And let me just, as an aside, Jan, you made the statement, the lesser that you're looking at the lesser of two evils. When you go for the lesser of two evils, you're still endorsing evil. And we shouldn't endorse evil at any time. Now, I understand why in the Cortez and Revelle race, you want to say the lesser of two evils, and maybe there's there. But the reality is the difference in the vote between the two of them would be as thin as the LA Times or toilet paper. Not much difference between the two of them. Stylistically, they may be different, but their voting record is going to be basically the same. And we shouldn't give cover to the Democrats. And it's something to think about for 2022 when we face the same situation again. But what county chairs are doing up and down the state is they're working in conjunction with the Steal for Congress campaign, the Garcia campaign, and others to make phone calls from their counties into the swing districts in California. And that's something we can do. They can make those phone calls along with the phone calls for our local candidates for Assembly, State Senate, and Congress. But Doug is a great example of the type of person and the type of campaign we really should be focusing on, because we have a chance with Doug and other candidates for city council, school board, and special districts. And if we work hard for them, we can elect Doug and others to office, and at the same time build what I call a farm team. And so that when Doug gets into office and others like him get into office, they learn the art of politics, what the process is about, how the procedures work, what's good about government and what's bad about government, and they'll understand how government operates. So when they are prepared, they could then run for Assembly, State Senate, or Congress with a background of understanding the insides of government rather than always being on the outside. Plus, it allows us something else. In your county, the more Republicans elected to local office, the easier it will be to elect people to the Assembly, Senate, and State, and for Congress. Why? Because if John Jones runs for the 15th Senate District in 4 years, and we all like John, who's going to endorse him? But if we have a large number of Republican office holders, we can go to them up front early, get them to endorse him, and begin the process of building a base for that candidate for state Senate or Congress or for Assembly. So it's important in many ways for us to be able to elect people like Doug Case to office, because in the end of the game, we all win, not only Doug. And we need to build the farm team. And in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be coming out with a proposal how to transform the California Republican Party from the 1950s, as it still operates, to 2020. We need to modernize the practices and procedures of the party and the goals of the party. And that'll be coming out in about 2 weeks. And it'll be sent to everybody on my newsletter list, as well as to every delegate to the state party. And one more thing, we need to be looking at, and Jen mentioned it, getting out the vote. In 2016 in California, 52% of evangelicals were not registered to vote. And of the 48% that were, only 50% of those voted. In other words, only 24% of the evangelical community voted in 2016. Imagine if we doubled that to 50%, how different the election returns would have been in 2016 and 2018 if we had doubled the number of evangelicals voting. And that still would have meant only 50% would have voted. And so it's very important to get out the vote, to explain to people the importance of it. Now, sometimes elections, and I've been doing this since the early 60s, sometimes elections are decided based on the candidates. Other times, elections can be decided in favor of the candidates based on propositions that are on the ballot. In 1982, the race for governor was between Tom Bradley and George Deukmejian. And the winner of that race was Deukmejian because of a ballot measure that Tom Bradley put on the ballot, thinking it was going to help him, and instead help George Deukmejian. And that was an anti-gun ballot measure. And that caused gun owners to come out to vote against that measure, and against Tom Bradley, who put it on the ballot, in favor of George Deukmejian, and George Deukmejian won. So how do we translate what happened in 1982 to the 2020 ballot propositions? And let me talk about a few of the propositions, and then we can get into others that you may have questions about. If I wanted to make sure of a massive Asian American vote for Doug Case, for every one of our candidates for Assembly, State Senate, and Congress, I would look toward Proposition 16, which is the racist KKK discriminatory measure bringing back affirmative action, which means discrimination. And the major group that is discriminated against by this measure, Proposition 16, are the Asian American community. Currently, about 35% of the UC and the State College students are Asian Americans. If Proposition 16 passes, they'll only be allowed 15% enrollment in state colleges and universities. In other words, 20% will be cut from college, cut from eligibility for college, not on their grades, not on their abilities, but on their ethnic heritage. That is called racism, and the KKK would be proud. Now, what I would do as a consultant for candidates, and I'm already doing it for several, I'm having my candidates challenge their opponents. Where do you stand on affirmative action? Do you wish to discriminate against Asian Americans? Do you wish to discriminate against women? Because under Proposition 16, there'll be less women allowed to enroll in the state colleges and universities. Do you, my opponent, believe that women are too stupid and unable to get a contract with a government agency, and that only government could put their finger on the scale to give them the contract? Do you think women are stupid? Is that why you support Proposition 16? Put them into a box. Make a challenge to it. And that's just one example of how to use a proposition. Then you have Proposition 15. Proposition 15, as we know, is split roll. and that's the one that increases the tax on commercial and industrial properties. And of course, the economic illiterates or the liars behind Proposition 15 will say, well, it doesn't hurt the small businesses. It doesn't hurt the homeowners. It's just those big investors who pay the taxes. Well, let me give you an economics 1 lesson. Never in the history of mankind, never in the history of mankind has a corporation paid a tax. They pay taxes, but they don't pay the taxes themselves. That tax money is a pass-through to those who rent or lease their property. It's called triple net. And so as the property taxes go up, the investor pays the extra taxes and then passes along to those individuals and the small businesses who rent their facilities or lease their facilities. So the corporation never, and the investor never pays a tax, the new property tax. And we need to ask the opponent, why do you want a tax increase on the small businesses? Second, they say, well, it doesn't affect Proposition 13 homeowners exemptions. Technically, that's true. In economic terms, that's a lie. As corporations and as businesses have to pay higher property taxes, they hire fewer people, they raise wages even less, they may decide to totally leave the state, making even more unemployment in the state, and that means the value of property, homes, goes down as more homes become available and fewer people have the wherewithal or the desire to buy a house in the state of California. So Proposition 15 can be used as a wedge issue on economics and the lie of the left on this. Then you have, I believe it's Proposition 21, which is the rent control. And rent control also can be used. If I wanted to stop affordable housing for the poor, I would pass Proposition 21. Because what it does is it has government in charge of determining what rents you're allowed to charge. Now, what person is going to build any more apartment complexes or even affordable housing, knowing that the amount they could charge for it is not under their control anymore? Government makes that decision, and therefore they don't have control of their own property. In economics terms, that's called socialism. In effect, government has taken over the ownership of private property via rent control. But that also means less affordable housing. And if I was a candidate for city council in any city, I would ask my opponent, why do you oppose the creation of more affordable housing by your support of Proposition 21 for rent control? As you could see, ballot measures can be used even on the local level to help us gain more votes. It's not necessarily that a candidate like Doug Case is qualified to be good in office, but we need to make the situation where there is an issue that divides him from his opponents that can be used to get votes for him and votes away from his opponent. And when you look at Proposition 16, 15, as well as 21, it's a good one. Then you can go to Proposition 25. 25 is the repeal of and it's poorly worded on the ballot. It's the repeal of the no cash bail bill. And here's the problem. In order to keep criminals in prison or in jail, we have to vote no on Proposition 25 so that we can go back to the cash bail situation. New York has had a massive, massive increase in crime by those individuals who are repeat offenders who got out on no cash bail. Uh, Sheriff Mims of Fresno has said publicly that 12% of her arrests in Fresno County now are of criminals who are let out based on no cash bail and recommit crimes. So if I was Doug Case or another candidate for office, I would say, why does my opponent want to put criminals back on the street, create more victims, and then have government play a game with us saying, but you know, we don't need to have cash bail. We have an algorithm, and we could put people on the streets. In fact, I would ask the sheriff of my county, please give us the numbers of people who have been let out on cash bail and how many have recommitted crimes within 90 days of being let out of jail without having to pay cash. So Proposition 25 is very important. Then we have Proposition 14. And Proposition 14 is something that we've seen before. We passed it before several years ago. This is the one for stem cell research. Interestingly enough, the man who benefited the most out of it was the guy who created it in the first place, a man by the name of Klein. And just yesterday, he gave several $100,000 to the cause to do it again. We previously passed a $5 billion bond. Now they want a $3 billion bond that will be paid off at the rate of 250 million tax dollars a year for the next 30 years. And what did we get out of the first several years of this for our first $5 million? We didn't even get a t-shirt. What we did get was a beautiful, absolutely beautiful building and research center. We hired hundreds of researchers and lots of staff and a lot of data people, and no results on stem cell research. Instead, while they were hiring people and paying off people for the bond measure, firms like Amgen and other biotech firms in the private sector were doing stem cell research without government assistance and doing quite well and being successful and profitable at it. And I would ask anybody who's running for office, why would you support taking tax dollars for something that doesn't work and instead trying to raise property taxes through Prop 15 on firms like Amgen and that use private investors without tax dollars? Why do you support government? Which goes to the basic question of, and I'll use Doug again as an example. I believe, and this is the first time I've met Doug, I believe the difference between Doug and his opponents is this. Doug believes in the people, his opponents believe in government. And that's the bottom line of the left. They do not believe people are smart enough, capable enough, or will do the so-called right thing in order to build a bigger government. And we need to believe in and trust the people. So Proposition 14 is another example of what we can do to show the differences between government. We believe in people. The Democrats believe in government. So let me go back to the measures here. Proposition 22 is the effort to allow workers, free Californians, to work as they please or not work as they please instead of being under the total control of government. Remember I talked about under rent control, government wants to take control of private industry and private property via rent control. The idea of AB 5 is that government could tell people if they can work, when they work, how they work, how much they get paid, what benefits there are, the fact they have to join a union, and they have to work for a major corporation as a full-fledged employee. If you pass Proposition 22, it allows the people who work for Uber, hundreds of thousands, Uber, Grubhub, Lyft, and other delivery services. They will be free to make a decision to work or not work, 5 hours a week, 50 hours a week, but it's freedom of choice of the worker. No one is forcing them to work for Uber, and no one should force them not to work for Uber, especially government force. And what I would do if I was a candidate for office, I would take a look at it and look at the hundreds of thousands of people who will lose their jobs if Proposition 22 is not passed. And I would say to individuals who are in my community, in my district, do you believe in your own freedom to work, or do you want government to have total control of you? My opponent believes you belong to the government. I believe you are a independent free soul that can make choices of your own. And that's the difference between us. So we could use this measure, Proposition 22, again, as an example of showing the division between the people and our candidates and the government. And our candidates always come out on the side of freedom. The Democrats always come out on the side of a totalitarian state. As I like to say, with the lockdown and all the bills that Governor Newsom has signed and his desire to keep the state closed, he is more qualified to be the president of Cuba than he is the governor of California. So there are some other measures that we should also talk about, and that's Proposition 19. And this is a very confusing measure, and purposely so, purposely confusing. What this does, the first half of it is great. I totally, absolutely support the first half of it. The problem is the second half, and you can't get away from both halves of the coin. You either vote for the whole thing or you vote against it. So what Proposition 19 does, it allows senior citizens to sell their homes, different homes, 3 times and still keep their original Prop 13 protection. That's a good thing. But what it does on the second half, it destroys the family farm in the state of California. What it does is if I owned a farm or a ranch and I decide, you know what, I want to retire, so I'm going to give my ranch to my children or to some other relative. Once I do that under Prop 19, if it passed, the farmland automatically gets reassessed and then reassessed every 3 years. And in fact, they are going to take about $2.5 billion out of the farms and agriculture of the state and give it to government. Now, who's behind this measure to kill off the family farms? 2 organizations. One, the California Farm Bureau. And that is because they are controlled by the giant agriculture corporations. Why do they support this? If I am forced to sell my family farm to pay the property taxes, who's going to buy the farm? Well, the corporations. They're big enough to do that. So the Farm Bureau loves this because it makes the corporations bigger and stronger. Second group is the California Real Estate Association. The realtors support it because that means there's more properties to be sold. And some of those farms will not be sold to corporations in the agriculture industry, but to developers who will change the farmland into single-family housing that the realtors will then sell. So it's very realistic to say the reason they're doing it is not because they're altruistic, but because they make money off the deal. And it doesn't matter to them that the small farmer and my ability to pass my farm or ranch onto my children and grandchildren has been harmed by their actions. They don't care. They're going to make a lot of bucks out of that. And so when we look at Proposition 19, we have to look at that very carefully. There's also another part of Proposition 19 that has to be looked at, and there is a Proposition 15. and there's a section in there that says that there's a cap on commercial or industrial property. If it's worth under $3 million, that's the cap, and they don't have to have increased property taxes. Read the measure carefully. There is a section in the measure that creates a task force, and the task force is allowed to raise that $3 million cap to $4, $5, or $6 million, which would be better, or they can cut the cap to $2 or $1 million, or end the cap totally. In other words, that $3 million is not a fixed figure. It's a goal, it's an aspiration that can be changed by a task force that is unelected by the people. And very few people look at that. Some folks say, well, you know, my little strip mall is worth under $3 million, and my little commercial building is worth under $3 million. It won't affect me. It will, because the task force will take you into it. And so Proposition 15 also has that little poison pill in it that I should have mentioned before. So that will give you an idea of some of the ballot measures. If you want to talk about some of the others, happy to do so. There's one that concerns me greatly, and that's Proposition 23. And that's the measure that increases the ability to have a dialysis center run by medical professionals who know what they're doing, versus the government making a determination that the dialysis center now has to have all sorts of new equipment and new sorts of personnel present, raising the cost of the dialysis centers. And in the rural areas of California, will put many of them out of business, and also in other areas, just raise the cost of dialysis, which people must have who have kidney disease. And there's approximately 80,000 people in California with that. We've already defeated this once before. They've come back with this again. This is a measure by the unions to get more union members rather than helping the health of the people of California. I urgently urge a no vote on Proposition 23. This one is truly a life and death measure. Wendy, I think I've gone over a lot of the measures, and maybe some I haven't, that people are interested in. And there are other things in the news that your people may have some questions about. I have about 14 minutes before I have to go to my next Zoom call, but happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, as always, Steve. Very educational. That was really good.
Wow.
Okay, I want to kick this off, and then Doug will come in with a question after. Dave says Prop 22 has a carve out for specific workers only, the Ubers, the Lyfts, the DoorDashes, whoever. He wants to know your thoughts on another strategy. We all vote against that yet another Swiss cheese carve out. Let Uber, Lyft, all those guys leave the state, and then maybe will AB 5 crumble? What do you think?
Well, prior to the end of the session of the legislature, they passed a fix-it bill that gave a lot of exemptions to almost everybody else but them, except for, interestingly enough, orchestras and musicians and some people in the entertainment field. And since those people are so far left and so crazy, that's their business. I don't worry about it. But no, I wouldn't want to punish hundreds of thousands of people for that type of a strategy. These are real people's lives that we're playing with, and we shouldn't be playing with their lives. So I understand the thought behind that, but I'm still going to vote yes on this measure.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah. Doug, do you have a question?
Well, what about, when the gas tax, from what I understood on the gas tax, that's a past example we might be able to use as proof that a lot of these propositions are misrepresentations, and you should follow the Republican recommendation on the votes, because the gas tax was a huge misrepresentation. Is there anything we can use there? I mean, maybe it's kind of like nobody's driving now, but I just thought that was a criminal way of presenting that prop.
Well, I think you make a very good point. As you know, the governor has redistributed the gas tax away from transportation and
as
to other
expected.
fields. And it's just a good example of you can't trust government. One of the most telling things is, I just did a story about it, neither the left nor the right trust government or respects it anymore. And because of the gas tax, as one example, the failure of government education, the failure of the billions spent on the train to nowhere for special interests and payoffs to donors, people understand that. And we can use that as an example of why, for instance, Prop 15, which they say, if you look at your ballot,
Yeah.
it says this is for schools. Well, let me tell you, that's a lie. 70% of the money from Prop 15 goes to the general fund of cities and counties. Only 30% goes to schools. And even then, in both cases, most of that money, in the case of city councils and counties, most of that money is going to go to CalPERS to keep their doors open. And in the case of the schools, most of that money will go to CalSTRS, which is the teacher's retirement, to keep that open, and nothing to the kids for education, and nothing to the people for public safety or for road repair or libraries. And so when you look at the gas tax, you can remind people that government lies.
Okay, thanks.
Always does. Okay, Jane Kearney just reminded me, and my Zoom link has been so squirrely today. Apologies if you already talked about this, but did you mention Prop 20, the one with the crimes under $950?
No, I didn't.
Thoughts on that?
I didn't cover all of them, and I should have. But Prop 20 changes the limit to like $1,500, but it does make the rape of a woman a violent crime. Because under Proposition 47, if you rape a woman who is under the influence of drugs or alcohol, even if the rapist gave her the drugs or alcohol, is considered a nonviolent crime. That changes that situation. It changes many others. It's a stopgap. It's not a great measure, but it goes a long way to getting us somewhere back to where we should be in public safety. It is only a halfway measure, but in this case, I would accept a halfway measure rather than no measure at all. But Prop 20 has to be passed.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, that is scary.
Well, another thing that I would comment on that from the sheriff's point of view, when they picked up a drug offender that was under parole and he had a load at 45. He accepted the search of his vehicle because apparently they're told to do that. It's a lesser of a sentence when they're on parole, and it was a cite and release. And the way they said it in the break room before everybody went out, I was in a meeting for the transition of the evening and the early morning shift. They said cite and release, and they just chuckled. That's all they do. They cite and release under this, even when they had methamphetamine and a load of 45. Cite and release for the perp. So Prop 47 is so dangerous, and it's got so many ways for these criminals to get out, but it's presented as, hey, some kid broke in a car and stole somebody's laptop. That's not what it's about.
Yeah, the terms of Prop 47 have made it almost impossible for criminals to be put away and for the safety of the general public. And the Democrats want to move further to the left on that. They want to, we see in San Francisco, not too far from where you guys are, we have a district attorney that doesn't want to prosecute any drug crimes. He's made that clear. He doesn't want to prosecute gang crimes. He's made that clear. And unfortunately, as you know, I live in Ventura County, which is next to Los Angeles. They're having a battle over a DA that George Soros just put in $2.5 million to his candidate for DA, $2.5 million, who doesn't believe that it's the purpose of government, and you'll love this, Doug, to stop human sex trafficking.
Whose job is it then? That's crazy.
I think the UN's.
Oh, there you go. Okay, Bonnie brings up, she says about the suburbs, it's way beyond the cost of housing with the high density, high rise housing. And she says there's videos out there by Stanley Kurtz. He was interviewed by Mark Levin on Fox. And what do you have to say about that? How nefarious is this?
I'm running campaigns in several places in California for city council. And one of the issues I'm making in every one of the race is don't make my town, whether it be Temecula, Simi Valley, Manhattan. I call it the Manhattanization of Los Gatos, the Manhattanization of Temecula, of Simi Valley. And that's what these people really want to do. They want to have your hometown look like Manhattan. Worse, the state legislature is moving in that direction, forcing the end of zoning locally, making it a state mandate on zoning, and that if you live in for instance, if the state had its way, I live in an HOA, 227 houses. If a few of the houses were bought, the developer could literally put up a 5-story building in the middle of our HOA, which would destroy the concept of what we live in, the quality of our life. But that's what they could do. But two cities are fighting it. Two cities are fighting it. One interesting is Beverly Hills, and they are successfully fighting it, while towns like Huntington Beach are being sued by the governor for not becoming Manhattan. And so I would use that. Ask my opponent. I'm doing an ad for a local newspaper for one of my candidates, and it's a picture of Manhattan versus a picture of Simi Valley. And I said, which one do you want to live in? Our opponent wants Manhattan.
This has been going on for a long time. Actually, we have a town near us called Montecito, and they, for the longest time, have had to come up with some designated lot that they were going to use for high density housing, and they keep picking on this church that has enough members to go out there and push back, and it always gets voted no on. So I guess they've taken it into their own hands now in the government. Pathetic.
The only way we're going to do it is from the grassroots. The people in the community have to make a determination. What do they want for their community? And that even goes up to the legislative thing. That's why we need to defeat the Democrats that want to Manhattanize California, from every small town to every large town. And we make the mistake of thinking, well, if we let Doug Case to city council, we've done our job and that's it. But no, we haven't, because the legislature is going to overrule Doug.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's my number one issue. I say, people ask me why I got into the race, and that's what I said. That's what triggered me, because I just am so tired of Sacramento taking away our sovereignty, and this affects you personally. This is local politics. Who are you going to vote for? Trump? This is local politics that affect you, and I bring it right back to that. And it scares some people, and there's enough examples of it that you can point to. It doesn't make sense in Montecito or Saratoga, because there's no transit near the middle of Montecito's new housing. It's just going to add traffic, and those are all luxury homes. It doesn't solve any problems. It only disrupts a semi-rural community. And the same thing in Saratoga.
Sad. And then Bonnie says, please mention that this is not an issue of building the high rises, but that a middle layer of federal government is inserted. Interesting.
That's also part of the problem. Again, it's government. And unfortunately, we need another 4 years of Trump as president to get rid of the recalcitrants in the federal government who still believe they don't have to listen to the president, they don't have to listen to the laws, they're a law unto themselves, and they're going to authorize things that should never be done because they control.
They're smarter than we are.
That? Is that even possible in 4 more years? This swamp is so deep.
Yes, I do believe that the reelection of the president, within a month, you're going to see firings of everybody, including the FBI chief. I think you're going to see.
So maybe we just encourage I was going to suggest, Steve, maybe we just encourage our undecided, that we'll just give them a chance, give them 4 more years to change this trend over the last 50 years of bigger and bigger government. You don't like big government, so why not give them a chance for 4 more years? And if you don't like it, then vote in a Democrat the next time. That's what they could. Yeah.
One of the great things that Trump has done is he's moving major portions of the Department of Interior, Department of Agriculture, and several other departments from the DC area into Denver, into North Dakota, into Kansas.
Wow.
And unions are just screaming. Tens of thousands are being moved out of DC. Now, those are votes that they need in Virginia. These people are going to go to the real world where they're going to see the damage they've done with their policies, and they're going to have to live among the people that are angry at them. And it's going to change policy. So that's one of the things Trump is doing, but he'll need another 4 years to continue that policy. He literally wants to get many of these agencies totally out of DC.
Wow.
So, and it's 10:59, so I need to get to 11 o'clock one. But
yeah,
I really appreciate being here. Now, the next time I'm on, if you invite me back, is going to be on the Friday after the election. I doubt if we'll have much to talk about then, but I'll think of something.
Very much looking forward to that one.
Yes, thank you, Steve. We totally appreciate you. I mean, and we here in Silicon Valley wouldn't be hearing this unless you gave up your time to do it. And we really appreciate that, Steve.
Well, glad to do it. I'm only looking forward to the day, Jan, Wendy, when I could actually come up to the Silicon Valley to one of your great breakfast meetings or lunch meetings and speak face to face with everybody and be part of the action rather than electrons sending my message across the waves.
And we look forward to that too, Steve. Thank you very much. We'll say goodbye. And we have one parting message to our audience. This is our voter guide. Check it out. It has it all. Measures, school board races, city council races, propositions, measures. We have it. Anybody who's an actual SVARW member is getting it in the mail. In fact, they're getting 2 copies in the mail, one for them and one to give to a friend. And it's available online on our website. So be armed and let everybody else know that it's available, and help us deliver door hangers so we turn out the Republican vote and get people like Doug elected to probably Doug. If we could turn out all the Republican vote, that would make a difference in Saratoga, wouldn't it?
There is quite a lot of Republican voters in Saratoga. And there's a lot of American flags out where I knock on their doors first. I'm meeting a lot of really good people, and I would say it's a good 40% is Republican, which is surprising because there's a lot of no party preference too. Maybe 30 to 40%.
And what about the opponents in your race?
They're based on what they're saying, more diversity, systemic racism, they're liberals. There is one that is apparently a registered Republican, but she's kind of she presents herself as a government type. So I'm really
You're the only one that's endorsed.
I'm the only one that's endorsed out of that group. None of them are really Republicans. I can tell by their position.
So we have enough people in Saratoga, 95070, who are willing to deliver door hangers.
Well, there's no door hangers allowed in Saratoga. If you want to help me, contact my email or go to my website and ask for a yard sign. I can put one of those in your yard, and it gets the word out that way. And I can give you some postcards that I have. And we're doing social media, we're doing emails to get the word out.
Oh, so signs are a good thing.
Yard signs are a good thing. Then I'm strategically placing them. I don't put them in a jumble of, where 10 other signs are. It's just, I'm being smart about it. I'm putting it on corner houses. I'm putting it in a good pass through in a neighborhood. And my opponents are putting 2 or 3 signs on a corner. It's like very lazy, and they're just not putting the effort in. I'm putting the effort in.
Great. Okay.
The website is just this Doug Case for Saratoga Council 2020, or an easier thing is an email to dougcase2020 at Gmail. Dougcase2020 at Gmail is very easy to remember.
Great. And thank you so much, Doug, for helping us.
Sure.
And thank you especially for running, because we really appreciate that.
It is a weird thing for me to do, but I've learned a lot, and it's enjoyable. There is some crazy work I have to do, and my wife has been amazing on the social media and a website, because that is just not my bailiwick. So, thank you for endorsing me.
Hey, keep plugging away. Keep plugging away, please. Okay.
Right.
Hey, thanks so much, and thank all of you for coming. And we've helped with your education today. Take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.